VIBErations podcast, episode 55, Paul French. Recorded Wednesday the 22nd of October 2025. Hi, I'm Gary Brightman, and this is my periodic podcast called VIBErations. Established in 2018, Vibe is a book and music shop situated in Moi Wo on Lantau Island in Hong Kong. Last weekend, we hosted a presentation by international author Paul French, which can be seen on our YouTube channel, live at VIBE So for this week's podcast, I interviewed Paul. Paul was born in the London Borough of Enfield in 1966. He attended Raglan Junior School and Edmonton County School, North London. He gained an M.Phil from the University of Glasgow and studied Chinese at the City Lit. After university, Paul worked briefly for Time Out magazine and Euromonitor in London before relocating to Shanghai. In 1997, he co-founded the independent research firm Access Asia. It specialised in analysing Chinese consumer and retail markets. In September 2011, Access Asia was acquired by the London-based market research company Mintel. Paul left the company and China to become a full-time writer of articles and books about China, based in London. His books include Midnight in Peking, Destination Shanghai, City of Devils, and Her Lotus Year. As we do, we're going to start off with, in your instance, we're going to start off with 8 questions.
Okay.
And the first question is, do you have a favourite book or author?
Well, I suppose, because a lot of what I do is literary non-fiction, I also do straight non-fiction, but someone who, I've always liked Graham Greene.
Okay.
British interwar, post-war writer. And I suppose if I think of a book like The Third Man,
yes,
which is set in a divided Vienna.
Yeah.
And although it's fiction, it's very much based on Greene having gone there, researched it, seen what's going on. So it's set against a real backdrop.
Yeah.
And stories that he had heard about the black market and smuggling. So a book like that, or his The Quiet American, which is the same thing again. It's Saigon around the time of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the end of the French influence in Vietnam. And again, he went there, stayed there, saw the bombs, saw the fighting,
right,
saw the Americans, saw the British journalists drinking G&Ts all day long, and came back and wrote it and slightly fictionalised it. Well, I don't do slightly fictional stuff, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
But I love that idea of getting in, researching and creating what nowadays, people who develop shows for Netflix or something would call the world.
Yes.
That you create the world and then you create a story within it.
Yeah. Okay. Favourite films?
Favourite films? Well, I'm kind of, I don't watch a great lot of films, so I don't have any great recommendations. I mean, I think the films of Zhang Yimou and so on, of the Chinese fourth wave directors were really very influential on me because around the time I was kind of studying Chinese and just afterwards, those films were coming out. So sort of Raise the Red Lantern, Shanghai Triad, those kind of Gong Li type films were coming out. They were really important to me in terms of what a great way to learn the language. Like foreigners always learn English because there's so much American and British television and things to watch. We don't always have that advantage, with other countries' media. So that was a really important for me after a day of learning Chinese in the classroom to sort of go and sit and just watch gorgeous, beautiful movies. And I was also into the aesthetic of it. So I can't really knock people like Wong Kar-wai and people like that.
Yeah.
Because, Christopher Doyle's whole aesthetic. And funnily enough, as well as the Wong Kar-wai movies, he was also the cinematographer on the Michael Caine, Brendan Fraser version of The Quiet American.
Yes.
Which also looks gorgeous.
Yes.
So that kind of aesthetic, which is lush and slightly exotic and slightly orientalized with colours and things, but comes from a Chinese tradition.
Yeah.
I really kind of enjoy, and I guess Chris Doyle is the exemplar of that.
Yeah.
So anything that he's involved in, I'm always wanting to watch.
Exactly. Great cinematographer and great, as you say, sort of grain and slightly sort of seems to lend from film noir The sort of the 50s and stuff. So he's got a kind of nice...
Yeah, I mean, the Reds and so on. I
shadows
mean, it's a plug for me, really. But a director that I work with sometimes in mainland China, Jiangwan. I mean, again, a great visual aesthete, but a Chinese director with a great sense of humour, a Chinese director with a great sense of the popular.
Yeah.
Like he's probably the most successful commercial director in China, apart from people who maybe are making rom-coms and things. But also someone who's made some really great films. Now, I'm going to get the name wrong, but something like The Sun Never Sets or something like that. His film about young children during the Cultural Revolution who are parts of privileged families who get... Because really everything has broken down during the Cultural Revolution. They have no idea that their families are being persecuted or not persecuted, the strains they're under. And they just run feral through Beijing, through the hutongs, through the party compounds and so on. Yeah. And it follows them through their youth and then teenage years. Yes. And I think that's... I rewatched that film recently. It's on YouTube. And that is an amazing story of what it was like to be... not involved in the Cultural Revolution, but there. Yeah. Like, what's it like to be 9, 10 years old when this chaos is going on around you? But which Jiangwan was. But also, it is aesthetically beautiful in terms of it's like one of those movies that's like An Eternal Summer. Yeah. So it's almost like if you were a child when school was out all the time and your parents didn't have time to supervise you or anything and you could just run around all summer, that film beautifully encapsulates that.
Yeah, no areas taboo. You just got the freedom.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And I think, if you're of a certain generation, which we are, we sort of had that as well. In the summer holidays, your mum would just let you take your bicycle and say you'd go out at 8 o'clock in the morning and meet your friends, and it'd be like, be back for your tea at 6 or something.
Back for tea time.
And you were just out all day with 20 pence in your pocket and your bicycle, and God knows what we got up to, and God knows how we didn't kill ourselves, but
or be
it sort of survived.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you have a preferred drink?
A preferred drink. So I'm interested in this because I actually nowadays seem to be drinking a lot of Negronis and Italian flavoured sour drinks, not bloody Aperol. Syrup. But but sour drinks. And I find that the reason I say it's interesting is that I think to me it's living proof that your tastes change. When I was young and interrailed around Europe and went to Italy for the first time and we bought those Camparis in a bottle that they sell down there, I thought it was the most disgusting medicinal muck I'd ever tasted. Yes. Yet now... I find myself craving kind of sour drinks.
A more sophisticated palate, and
maybe. I mean, I think life it changes in life. Some foods that you don't want to eat before you don't, and I find that with drinks. So, and I think it's just part of aging. It's part of changing. And so, if it can work with drinks, it can work with anything. Is my argument to people that won't change their mind about things.
Do you have a life motto?
I forget who it was that said it. Might have been Hemingway, might have been someone else. But get it right. Okay. I think is the way to do it. I think, and I get asked a lot by people who want to write books or do their memoirs, or young people starting out, or old people who've retired and want to write something. How does it happen? I have an idea, or it's all in my head, but when I sit down at a computer, nothing happens. It goes so my argument is get it writ. And then get it right. Yes. Get words on a page or on a screen, and then go back and fiddle with it, because actually the kind of brain dump is an interesting thing. And I know that people think now, but don't use AI or whatever for your brain dump. But just brain dump. Just let it all pour out. Don't think about, I've got to get from point A in the plot from point A to point B to point C. If point F or point W pops up, just write it all down. Get it. And then you'll actually find the enjoyable bit is once you've got it, going back, and that process, like sculpture really, of refining, chip off a bit there, smooth a bit there. That's how I think books get written.
Do you have a favourite Hong Kong walk? Do you walk much?
Yeah, no, I do. And in fact, my walk is one that I've written about for the SCMP, which is Kadoorie Hill. And I know that many people in Hong Kong don't know Kadoorie Hill. But I'm not from a Hong Kong background. I've only ever visited Hong Kong. But I lived for many years in Shanghai, which is a great Art Deco city. Because I come from London, which has its fair share of Art Deco along with everything else. And when I found out, somehow or other, that there was this cluster of beautiful Art Deco architecture on Kadoorie Hill and along Prince Edward Road West. Yeah. And yet everyone I talked to in Hong Kong about it had no idea about it.
No.
So get yourself on the MTR to, Prince Edward or Mong Kok East.
Yeah.
Come out, walk along Prince Edward West Road. Yeah. You'll see the beautiful building on one side, a white building that's been very well restored. That's an Art Deco building that was built by Franco-Belgian money, actually, near St. Teresa's Church. Yeah. And then go around the corner from there and you'll see Kadoorie Avenue. And it just doesn't look like a road you would walk up.
No.
But walk up it, and although there are high walls and quite a lot of celebrities and people live there, politicians, so there's some barbed wire, you'll see absolutely beautiful Art Deco villas that are the best, as good as anything in the world. There's a little cut-off from it called Braga Circuit, after Jose Braga, the Macanese businessman, big in Hong Kong. There's a beautiful muse there with modernist properties. If you go on the other side and walk around Kadoorie Avenue, you'll come to St George's Court, which is an incredible Art Deco apartment building.
Yes, yeah.
Very different to most apartment buildings in Hong Kong that have retail on the ground floor and flats on the above. This is a pure, more like a London mansion block, but with more Art Deco kind of flourishes. Come down the other side and you're at Mong Kok East. It's a great walk. Yes. And you'll see a whole other architectural style that nobody really associates with Hong Kong.
Okay. I think that's great advice. And, this is about the 50th or 60th interview we've been doing. Every single interview, people talk about the green and the countryside and the trails. So I really like this idea of explore your city a bit. And why would you go to Kadoorie Road and Avenue unless it was for the pure pleasure of looking at the architecture and tapping back
Gary,
into this
I am a serious hardcore environmentalist, and the way that I express my environmentalism is by never going to the country, never doing anything silly like hiking across green spaces or anything, and staying completely away from the country, and animals and insects, and sunburn and anything else that can happen. So I am practicing my environmentalism by sitting in a bar, talking about architecture and not interfering with nature at all.
I think you've justified it quite nicely there, actually, Paul. I like it. That's a London boy talking. All right, so do you have a favourite restaurant in Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong, do you know, I write a lot of history, so I have a kind of memories of restaurants. Yeah. And I was talking the other day where I was in Jardine House for some reason, the house of 1,000 arseholes down there where the Johnnies used to hang out. And we were talking about the old grappas that used to be in the basement there, which was kind of very functional Italian trattoria with sticky carpets and all the rest of it. But somehow it worked as a restaurant. Yeah. 1998, I came to Hong Kong. We had a book out. It was about how... it was a business book about how, from my previous life when I was a retail consultant, about how the retail market in China was going to take off. Yeah. And we were in the middle of the Asian financial crisis. Hong Kong was bleeding to death on the carpet from that. And nobody believed us that the consumer market was going to take off in China. And in fact, we were ridiculed in The Economist for this idea. But anyway, we came and we did it. And we were taken out for dinner that evening to a restaurant on Long Kwai Fong called Indochine.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember Indochine on Long Kwai Fong? And we went there, and you talk about the aesthetic of Chris Doyle and Zhang Yimou. This restaurant personified that.
It did, and it oozed.
And, obviously, if you've read any of my books, I can't really resist all of that stuff. I try not to exoticize it or orientalize it, but it is an aesthetic style. Yeah. Chinoiserie, Chinois, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I used to love that restaurant. Yes. I find it, obviously, from a historical point of view, though I think they've closed again. Jimmy's Kitchen. That used to be there, right? That's
right. They closed in their kind of original place, but then they've now reopened again and just moved a few streets along.
So not in the same place, but obviously the historic heritage of Jimmy's Kitchen, having been in Shanghai before the war and then moved down here, and the whole role of that. I found that absolutely fine, and the food was always... When we were living in Shanghai before Shanghai really took off and boomed, coming down here to eat in... Jimmy's Kitchen or Dan Ryan's was such a massive treat for us because there wasn't food like that in Shanghai in the sort of early 90s. So it was kind of a real treat for that. Nowadays, I'm never sure. I had beautiful evening with my partner recently at the Pawn, in Wan Chai. I think it's called.
Johnson Road, opposite the Southern Stadium.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate my food, but it's really the setting and the company and everything that makes it nice. And we sat on the balcony and kind of just looked out across. Yeah, it was very nice. I
think they've still got the wooden floors in there, haven't they? Yeah, that big pawn shop. It's about 5 floors.
It's lovely. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I really liked it. Yeah.
What was the best advice you were ever given?
Best advice I was given. I was at a dinner years ago with Colm Toibin, the great Irish writer, novelist, thinker, non-fiction writer, travel writer. I mean, real genius. And I was just starting out on a life of spending a lot of time at literary festivals and things like that. And I was like, oh God, literary festivals and everything. And he said to me, always make time for people that show up at events.
Right. Okay.
Don't get churlish with them. Just do that. And then he said, so always take care because that's your customer. And his other bit of advice, which I've stuck to and so far haven't had to use, was doesn't matter who you are, how best-selling you get, how important you are. Yeah. You only ever get 2 flame-outs with your publisher. Right? There are 2 things on which you can just say, I'm really angry about this. I don't want this to happen. And you can throw a hissy fit. Yeah. But you can only do it twice.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how many books you sell. You can't get away with it more than that. And so far, I've never had to do it. But I was always like, he was always like, too many people get angry about things straight off the bat, and they become kind of people that are known as difficult to work with and so on like that. And it's like there are enough best-selling or successful or mid-list authors in the world that the publishers can afford to dump a few if they're trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought so.
And that was his advice, and that was advice from someone who sells an awful lot of books. Yeah. So I thought, if that's the way he's kind of managed to keep going in the industry, then probably listen to him.
Do you have a favourite area of Hong Kong?
Favourite area of Hong Kong? Well, I've already used up the Kadoorie Hill, Kowloon Tong sort of area, so I'll have to come up with somewhere else. I mean, I've always I've always enjoyed wandering in the mid-levels, which is not particularly surprising. I'm always interested in the fact that that's an old area. That's an area that everyone thinks is charming and rather old and delightful. But of course, there was a terrible fire in 1878 that destroyed the original mid-levels, which was wooden. And so this kind of brick and concrete mid-levels is new, but so much time has passed that it's become
weathered and
charming. And so I've always liked that kind of area. But then I think I also kind of have always enjoyed Shim Sha Choi and across that way, because when I first used to come to Hong Kong and, younger and didn't have much money, I always stayed in hotels over there. Yes. So I got to kind of know that area pretty well. And, I always liked kind of wandering around in that bit,
the little
bit
back
of the city.
Streets. Okay. All right. So we've done the warm-up questions. So now we're going to move on to you, Paul, really, and your life. So you were born and grew up in London, I understand. Yeah.
Just like to say North London.
North London, yeah.
So that,
good. The same side as me.
Originally, and then we moved out for a long time, out sort of Enfield way, out to the suburbs.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all around North London, really.
Yeah, which is a great area, a fantastic area, great part of the world.
It is an important place to grow up because it's a multicultural area. Yeah. It's an area with lots of different communities. Yeah. And so, you very early on appreciate difference and diversity and whether it's in people, cuisine, religion, thinking, whatever it is.
It's a real melting pot.
Yeah, it's a great melting pot, and it's been largely successful.
Yeah. You grow up in North London. What makes you become interested in China? What was the first thing that tweaked your...
So I actually have no great answer to this. Okay. Well, I only have a daft answers to this.
Okay,
one is reasonably sensible in that, one of the great problems about the UK education system is we don't do any Chinese history. We don't really think, kids don't really think about China. They don't talk about it. Really. Big trading partner, big geopolitical rivalry, however you see it, massive opportunity, massive threat, whatever you want to say. Right? And people don't know their history. And they certainly don't know the history of Anglo-Chinese relations as well as the Chinese know the history of Anglo-Chinese relationships, however distorted some of that might be, but they still get it. So we don't, but I was very lucky that I got in my last year of school in the history class, I had a history teacher who chose to do a comparison between the Russian and the Chinese revolutions.
Okay.
And that kind of interested me a bit more than kind of, kings and queens and things like that. Yeah. So I got into it that way. And then when I was doing A-levels, I did a bit more Chinese history at A-level, fortunately. And I used to go to the Holloway Odeon, the Odeon Cinema on Holloway Road, which is still there, massive Art Deco flea pit. Yeah. And on a Friday night, they would show 3 Hong Kong movies.
Really?
Starting at about 10 or 11 o'clock. Wow. So by the time you got out of there, it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Right? And you had to get the night bus home.
Yeah.
And I was watching these movies. It was mostly to attract people who wanted to watch kung fu.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was a bit dangerous because afterwards you go to the night bus stop
and there'd
always be some guy who wants to try his kung fu on your head, But, such is North London.
That's his life.
So... I used to watch them, and at that time it was the era of kind of the early John Woo gun fu flicks, and it was all slow motion. Everything was super cool. Yeah, fast cars, great bars, great banquets, tons of neon. Yeah, all the rest of it. And I like these more than the kind of chop socky or sort of Chinese ghost movies or something like that. I like these cool movies, a bit more young Chow Yun Fat and things like that. Yeah. So for some reason. I didn't come from a very sophisticated family. No. For some reason, I thought that maybe China was like this. Right?
Yes,
This was China, right?
Yeah.
Hong Kong, China.
All action.
Yeah, and you have to remember in the 80s, you couldn't really afford to go to Hong Kong.
No, absolutely not.
It was so expensive, right? And also the only people that you ever sort of saw pictures of or maybe marginally came across who'd been to Hong Kong and worked there were not necessarily the most appealing people in the world. It was all guys that wore rugby shirts and were called Rupert and it just wasn't the sort
the banking set.
Yeah, the filth, right? It was filth.
So in London.
Public school.
Try Hong Kong.
Yeah, rugby, beer, loud, stupid kind of people. So it didn't really appeal. So I ended up doing Chinese history, culture, things like that, and then eventually language, and did a bit of time studying in China. Okay. But of course, when you got to China early on in those days, late 80s or so on, it was nothing like those John Woo movies.
Sadly.
Right. So when you went to, Beijing was a fairly, communist, hardcore city. Yeah. And all the action economically and so on was happening down south. That was where Deng Xiaoping was directing it. So Beijing was very political, lots of people wearing uniforms, walking around, very grey, just big and sprawling and everyone very polluted.
Yes.
Shanghai, because it was left as last city to open up for obvious reasons because of the reputation of the Shanghainese in business and so on, which everyone in Hong Kong knows. It was as if a dust sheet had been thrown over the city in 1949, which from my point of view was great. Yeah. So never underestimate how political stagnation is good for preserving heritage. Yeah. Right? It's when places start making money that they forget about their heritage and start bulldozing it and couldn't care less.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating place to see and also sort of encouraged you. The problem I had was, being interested in China and working pretty hard on it was, I graduated, my final exams were June 1989. Yeah. Which was not a great year to plan a career in China.
No.
So I kind of went off and did some more studies at postgraduate.
So what were you studying? Did you?
Well, I was doing primarily history with language components and sort of cobbling it all together as much as I could. I wanted to do wider history than just China. But Chinese was a component within that.
Right.
And I was looking at literature and translation, literary studies, all that. So really Chinese cultural studies, and every way I could, I would get into courses that would allow me to do China.
Yeah.
And so that all held together, and then I kind of, with some other friends who'd studied Chinese as well, we set up a research company, a market research company, because it was the 90s and you could kind of do that sort of thing in China at the time. We were based in Shanghai. The 90s and the early 2000s in Shanghai was an absolute,
great time.
In a way, a golden age. And I know everyone thinks where they chose to be when they were younger was a golden age. But I think you can prove with metrics that Shanghai was very special at that time. In terms of what you could get away with, in terms of what they wanted you to get away with to help boost the economy, to to bring expertise, right? I mean, our expertise was a bit of language and having seen a bit more of the world than local people at that time. And it became a very special time, a very special sort of moment. I do so many interviews in China now when books come out. And most of the journalists who do arts and books coverage are sort of young women. And after they've switched the microphone off, they'll say like, so, Shanghai in the 90s or early 2000s, what was it like? And, it's become in many people's, those people who are more kind of creative, liberal perhaps in China, it's become a kind of golden age. Life was tougher for some people in terms of living conditions and things, but there wasn't really any unemployment. But also, as much as we were walking in and setting up businesses and doing different things, the Chinese were doing that as well. I mean, the company I was involved with, I was working with Chinese companies all the time that were like, I remember like a guy who was our age, 20s. He'd started to import, lingerie from the West, because there wasn't, if you went into a Chinese underwear shop, it was like these old Soviet reinforced knickers and bras with sort of,
industrial.
pretty hard to get into and pretty hard to get out of as well. It wasn't very flattering, very sexy. And so he starts importing that. And of course, once he's imported it, he then starts manufacturing it, right? Once he's seen what, I don't know, Victoria's Secret or whoever we're doing,
then you copy
he starts copying it and making it more in Chinese sizes and more flattering for the typical Chinese silhouette, as we say in the fashion industry. So he starts doing all of that. And, there were so many different ideas that Chinese people were pursuing, but wanted to think, how do I market that? How can I sell that back to the West? How can I? So it was and these were all people who had not gone and studied abroad, who had not had a chance to travel, right? I mean, later on they all did, but they had not. None of them had done that. They'd been in Shanghai, and they were just lucky enough to be the right age that thing opened. The generation before them was lost. It had been, their parents. They'd been that age in the Cultural Revolution, so nothing had happened. The generation after actually had, in a way, a lot more pressures. Well, you had to think about study abroad. You had to think about buying apartments. The pressures kind of piled on, as they do in capitalism, right? Capitalism wants you to spend money, and you have to kind of do it. Life was a lot cheaper on everything from your gas and electric bill to, for us as foreigners. I mean, I when most of the time that I was in China, and this is up until 2008, 2009. I mean, I was there longer, but around that time, when they revalued the renminbi, we were on 15, at times 16 renminbi to the pound.
Right.
Now it's about 6 now, right? The exchange rate was running massively in our favour. The government wasn't really taxing us very highly. We were paying tax, but the taxation rates were low by standards we were used to in Western Europe and so on. And it was things were happening. It was a kind of fun place to be. So, so I moved sort of seamlessly from education into this world, and I just carried on kind of learning, really.
So that was kind of a sort of, I don't know, about a 10-year period sort of thing. You were there.
Yeah, from the sort of
90s,
from the sort of late 80s through to the late 90s was that, and then I was there till 2014 or something like that. But there was that period where you could kind of go with no money in your pocket, get a 6-month visa out of Hong Kong, set up a rep office, and do what you want, meet some Chinese guys, have a joint vision of what you wanted to do, and get on with it.
Okay.
No one bothered you.
Okay, so you're there, you're doing that, you learn Mandarin at some point, don't you?
Oh, no. I mean, I was doing that at uni and everywhere else. That was,
I guess you could hone your skills in...
Well, of course, So, you had some immersion from study at uni, and then obviously, being in at the deep end and trying to survive. And when we first went there, we'd set up a company. We went to look for, and it was ridiculous, really. You're talking about 2-3 English guys just out of university, and we went to Beijing, and there was a guy that had come over. We were working for research companies in the UK, and these Chinese guys had come over wanting to do a joint venture with them. And these guys were from the state statistical department that did retail stats, such as it was at that time. But just how many cabbages are being sold? How many cars are being sold? Not many at that time. All these things. How many bicycles? But they had stats. They came over, but they were old school Chinese guys. Like they were chain smoking, looked like a hand grenade had gone off in their mouth. They kind of wore very shabby, kind of cheap suits. they were rough and ready Beijing guys, right?
Yeah.
And they got turned away by everybody. Turned away by everybody. But at one company that we were freelancing for at the time, we were called into the meeting to help translate.
Yeah.
And we thought these guys were pretty cool.
Yeah.
We liked them. And we thought that they were that they had something. So when we stopped freelancing for that company, we called them up.
Yeah.
And they said, come and see us. And we went to Beijing, and they were in a grotty building on the outskirts of Beijing somewhere.
Right.
And we went somewhere, and in those days we all smoked.
Yeah.
And we just chugged away on these Chinese cigarettes, and they showed us all this data they'd got. And we showed them things that they had never seen before, like a PDF.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
An Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
They'd never seen any of this. They were recording it all by hand in ledgers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so we said, look, we can take this. And of course, they were being urged to become self-funding, right? Self-sufficient, but they didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we were like, we can take this data. We can then put it all in nice graphs. We can then write stuff around it.
Help scale it.
Yeah, and we'll sell this to Western companies that are all, at the moment, very excited about China. And so that's how we kind of got started in the business, was they gave us all of this data, and then they got more sophisticated about it. We got more sophisticated about it.
Yeah.
We started gathering a little bit of our own data. Then people come to us and say, in your data, there isn't, I want to sell microphones into China.
Yeah.
Does China make microphones? If so, how many does it sell a year? And we would go to them and say, can you get that? And they'd say, because they were the government. No problem, we can find this out.
Okay.
And they'd come back and say, well, we've got 3 microphone manufacturers, but they're making these reboot old Soviet microphones. No one really wants them. And we found out that new radio stations and things here are buying whoever's from Europe or America or whatever. Yeah. So we put all that together in a report, sell it to that. Split the money, blah. So we were kind of able to do that, and that was just because they'd gone to the UK and tried to do a deal with a big market research company, and they were shown the door. And funnily enough, one of the companies that showed them the door and said, "We're not interested." Yeah, too soon after 1989. Yeah, who the hell are you, scruffy oik, right? Yeah. Can't understand a word you're saying. All the rest of it. They said to me, that company later on bought us. Right, and so it was kind of, so that was kind of, we didn't stay in that joint venture all the time because they reshuffled their departments and things, but it was just that kind of thing that you could just walk in the door of these guys and say, hey, do you want to do something? And they were like, yes, we do. And they weren't particularly nervous about us, and they were willing to work with like 2 guys in their mid-20s, who literally just walked in off the street.
Okay, so just changing tack slightly then, at what point are you starting to write books or write text?
So I was in Shanghai, and I was initially fascinated by foreigners in Shanghai. Yeah. I had things that had always interested me about that. My great-grandfather was with the Royal Navy for a while in Shanghai, running the coaling station for the Royal Navy China Station, which went between Hong Kong, Shanghai and Weihai at that time. Yeah. This is the 1920s. Yes. And he had got his arms tattooed with Chinese dragons while he was here, and used to like talking about Shanghai and all the rest of it. And I knew him. He lived a very long time. So when I was sort of 8 or 9, he was great-grandfather, and he was still alive, living in Tottenham and telling stories down the pub with his tattoos out and everything. Yeah. So I'd always been interested in that, and I started doing research work on where foreigners had lived in Shanghai, who was there, looking for interesting characters. It was a bit more straight non-fiction. It was a bit more, you had to really be interested in the subject to read it. I published a lot of it with Hong Kong University Press here, and it did quite well. And that was working well for me. And then I thought we were getting to a point with our research company where I didn't have to sort of be in the office every day. The staff were running it, and I could be a bit lazier. And so this is, 2010 or something like that. Yeah. And I thought I wanted a new project. So I thought, what I'd like to do is do a book that encapsulates Chinese history and encapsulates the world of interwar China, which is what I'm interested in. Yeah. Has an element of foreign and Chinese involvement. Yeah. And is a big, big story that perhaps people around the world would read. And I was thinking at that time of books I used to read as a kid, like The Far Pavilions and books like that, The Jewel in the Crown.
Yes.
I forget who wrote them, but
Yes,
they were
colonial.
They were great novels set in the Raj.
Yes.
And they were interpersonal stories about people falling in love, getting in feuds or whatever. But they were set against the backdrop of the Raj, of end of empire, of partition, of the rise of Gandhi, of whatever, right? And I thought, this is giving you a great education on British India.
Real life versus
British India and
event.
Decolonisation. But it's giving you a good story as well.
Yeah.
And I thought that at that time, true crime was going through its kind of first wave of a golden age. I mean, the second one has been all the Netflix shows and everything. But the first one was really some books that came out at that time. Devil in the White City, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, books like that, which I was reading. So I thought maybe if I could find a story that was big enough, I could do it. And I was looking through the old newspapers and I came across, which you know, weren't at that time digitised. No. And I came across the story of Pamela Werner and her murder in January 1937. And then what came out of that was... It was a very crucial time for that to happen. It's 6 months before the Japanese invasion.
Yes.
The question for the Chinese is not if Japan will invade, but when. And the whole issue was that it was given to the Chinese detective because it's Beijing. It wasn't Shanghai. It's not a foreign treaty port or anything. But they brought in a British detective who was working in Tianjin with the British concession in Tianjin. So... It was a British and Chinese detective working together, which I think is the only time that's ever happened in history. Yeah. But for real, it was the murder of the daughter of a quite senior British diplomat, very interesting character. And it all happened within the ancient walls and ancient watchtowers and the hutongs of that area. Plus it brought in this place called the Badlands that had not really been written about much, which was a sort of foreign red light area. So everyone knew about the Bada hutongs, which was... the Chinese red light area, but no one much knew about the Badlands. Yeah. So it had all of those elements. So these people are all around, but it's still Chinese territory. It's not Shanghai. It's not, and it's not a colony like Hong Kong. It's not a semi-colonial treaty port like Shanghai or Tianjin. No. So it's kind of. It had all the elements. Yeah. And then on top of that, I discovered a lot of papers in the National Archives in the UK that seemed to have led to a conclusion in the case, which never got sorted out because of the Japanese invasion in July 1937, and then because Britain went to war and what can you do? The embassy had to close, all of this. So I felt like I had the whole story, an interesting revelation, a great cast of characters, and most importantly for me, you could tell the history of that period. You know, I mean, it's not so widely misunderstood now, I think, but you know, 10, 15 years ago. It was the general consensus, and probably still is, that everyone in Britain would think that the Second World War started in 1939. Everyone in America would think it was December 1941. But for China, it was a much longer Second World War, really from July 1937. I know some historians now take it back to 1932 and the annexation of Manchuria, but that I think. But 37 is a good date. So I think it had everything, and it had a lot of history in there. I mean, both... The history of that period, the Japanese invasion, the internment of foreigners, the occupation of Beijing. But it also had the world of the watchtowers, the walls, the markets, the food streets, and the hutongs that I really wanted to get into. So hopefully, and it kind of worked because people who were into China enjoyed it as a different sort of book on China. And... it just goes on selling that book with the true crime crowd, with people who just sort of come across it one way or another. It's kind of, so I have to say I did crack that one. I am still very into reading literary nonfiction. So literary nonfiction is where you use all the techniques of the novelist, but you don't make up any places, you don't make up any people, you don't make up any events, no clues, nothing like that. So you have to stick to the facts as much as possible, do the research, but then write it in a slightly different, in a more novelistic way. And I think it's, you almost kind of give people a hidden history lesson if it works. And, it's what I like to read. So I always think you should probably write what you like to read. So that story kind of worked and really resonated with people. And, it's done very well in Chinese as well. It's done really well in Chinese because the idea of a murder and someone getting away with it,
Yeah.
and the father of the murdered person trying desperately to solve this case against the backdrop of a world kind of gone mad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And millions of people dying.
Yes.
But trying to work out who killed this one person.
This one, yeah.
So that old Stalin thing of,
Yeah.
one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. Is kind of there. And so that's really massively resonated with the Chinese audience as well. They've really, that's something that's common to all cultures and religions. The idea that if people can get away with murder, something's very, very wrong.
Yes.
Right? It discombobulates all of our ideologies and all of our moral culture. I mean, I'm always quite interested in trying to capture, if you can, smells, sounds, slang. Things like, in City of Devils I did, there's a lot of slang from that period, but also the very specific Shanghai, China coast slang that still kind of exists.
Right.
Like if you go to Shanghai or Beijing, you mix with some foreigners there'll be ones that don't speak Chinese, but they'll know a few words of something. I can remember people who weren't really Chinese speakers, that was a sort of slang thing. I mean, I don't know if foreigners in China still say it, but would say like, jianda. Like, for real. Is that real? Is that true?
Okay.
Right? But it's like a very Chinese expression, and it works quite well.
Yeah.
And so, you would get these words that all foreigners sort of knew, even if they didn't speak the language.
Yeah.
And so I was coming across those in books as well.
Yeah.
I forget what it is now, but there was a certain word for hailing a rickshaw in Shanghai.
Yes.
You'd put your hand out and you'd shout this word. I can't remember what it is. It's something like, it's Huang something, because it's yellow. It's to do with yellow. Originally, rickshaws were yellow in Shanghai. And so there's this thing that everyone would have shouted. Now, every foreigner 2 days off the boat would have known this phrase. Right? And kind of no one knows it now.
It becomes currency.
But, but I find that you can just layer that stuff. So you're constantly reading, you're constantly looking at things, you're constantly reading old memoirs, old newspapers, old magazines.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to capture those things of what did the cities smell? What did the cities smell like?
Yes.
What why did they smell in certain ways? What fuel are people burning, or how many cars are there?
And what the seasons bring.
Yeah, and sometimes I get weather all the time, right? I mean, the book I've just finished, there's a lot of weather in that, right?
Yeah.
And things that are specific to China, like plum rains or typhoons coming in or whatever it is. Capturing that, what's in bloom, what's flowering, what's perfuming the cities, what food, right? What are people eating? What does it smell like? Where are they getting it? All of that kind of stuff you're kind of layering on, and I'm trying to sort of read as much as possible all the time and absorb that by osmosis almost.
Yeah.
But also making lots and lots of notes.
Yeah.
And there's things that people talk about, that people always repeatedly talk about. There's one that I know I've overused, and in fact I just did an edit on a book and I realised I'd used it twice, and I had to take it out, and I thought, am I going to leave the first one in because it's in another book? So I've left it in. But it's like everyone who was there in the mid-1920s talks about the new trolley bus system in Beijing that used to come out of Tiananmen and then along Chang'an towards the Forbidden City. And they didn't used to grease the wheels, so they were screeching all the time. Okay. And everyone remembers this noise because it was so horrendous. Yeah. So I always use that, or like hawker calls of the people that wandered the hutongs all day. And in Shanghai, you've got this real polyglot thing with Chinese and Americans and Brits using sort of Russian slang words from all of the Russians that were there. Like there's this one, Nichevo. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And everyone would use that. Yeah. Doesn't
matter where they're from.
And words from Yiddish and words from Indian. I mean, the Shanghai bund, right? I mean, it's a Hindi word for a raised waterfront.
Right.
So all of these words were coming out of all these different languages and Chinese and Chinese different dialects, Shanghainese as well as, Cantonese, Mandarin, all the different millions of dialects. Well, not millions, but hundreds of dialects. Yeah. And they're all being used. And
very much like London, really, isn't it? And the Cockney slang and the the East End and the Docks language.
Accents and the way people talk change. Trying to capture that, I think is fun. And I know when I get sent a lot of books where people have tried to write a novel set in China at that period or something like that, and I just think it might be quite a good plot, but it's written as if everyone lives today. Publishers are always nervous that, people won't get lots of the references.
Yeah.
They won't get the words. Sometimes you have to sort of explain them out, try and find a clever way to explain them. But I don't think it matters. I think they can Google them, or they just let it wash over them to create atmosphere. So I'm kind of, those people have kind of fascinated me, and I stay within that world. I'm a great believer. Like, maybe it's just the way my brain works. I'm always amazed by writers who I meet at festivals and things, who will write a book about Hong Kong and then they'll go and write a book about Argentina. And I'm just like, I don't know how you can do that, or whether or not you're really doing it as well as could be possible. Yeah. Like I have one thing and it kind of it's not the same story again and again and again, but it's elements of the same world again and again. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Midnight in Peking is Beijing in the 30s, City of Devils is Shanghai in the 30s, the Wallace Simpson book is mid-1920s. I've just done a new book out next year about the last emperor, which is the mid-20s, but a very different world from the one Wallace Simpson's in. So it's kind of... you're moving around in that same space, looking for the stories that are going on, and hopefully at some point, it all makes sense to me, kind of what I'm doing next. But it's kind of at some point you're kind of getting this whole, as I said, this
whole world together,
that comes together and reflects both the Chinese and the foreign sojourner world that's there as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to sort of wrap it up a little bit by just sort of going through. What are you doing now? Where are you living now? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Where are you working?
Well, I'm in London most of the time, and I come back to China quite a lot.
Yes.
And occasionally get invited to Hong Kong for one thing or another, which is always nice. I go to Macau quite often because that's always been a little passion thing for me, old Macau. But mostly Beijing nowadays. Not so much in Shanghai. The work I do in China is more with publishing, TV, film, documentaries, things like that. That's also Beijing based. I'm also sort of fascinated by Beijing a lot. I think it's really, like Shanghai was extremely vibrant in the 90s and 2000s. I don't think there's anyone who would argue that it's the most vibrant city in China anymore. No. It kind of, its moment has passed. Like all cities have moments, and that moment has passed.
Heydays.
That kind of vibe there didn't survive COVID. Whereas Beijing kind of bounced back and it has a lot going on, I think. So that's what I do. In London, I work out of the London Library in St James's, which is a private library. You have to sort of join it. But it has a massive collection of books. And for me, the topography and history sections and biography sections are and it's all on the shelf. So I can kind of just do all the research I need, and it's a quiet space, and it's not far from where I live. But I get to Beijing a lot and working with companies there on various documentaries, films. My books do well in Chinese, and I like them all to get translated quite quickly into Chinese.
Who's translating? Do you have one translator?
I have one translator that's done all of mine. I mean, my stuff is different, but we get on well.
That's working well, isn't
Normally
it?
when you do translations, like, I don't know, Brazilian Portuguese. I have a translator who does Brazilian Portuguese. I've done 3 books with him. He's a lovely guy. I've no idea if the translations are any good. With the Chinese language one, it's quite interesting to work with them and to get it right. I don't get censors at all in China, I must say. I mean, the stuff I write doesn't...
That's interesting.
Doesn't get that. I mean, we can sometimes have an argument about how patriotic or otherwise a warlord was, but nothing else much.
Fair do.
So, well, most of my books are about white people killing white people in China, so there we go. And then Wallace Simpson. Wallace Simpson is one that's coming out next March in China, and they've done the translation for that, and nothing has hit the rocks with that yet. So I'm expecting that to be okay. And that's a good example if you want to do a book for China. Because, and I kind of learnt this a little bit from Stephen Schwankert's book, The Six, about the 6 Chinese that are on the Titanic. If you can take a story that everyone in China knows, but doesn't know there's a China element to it, and then you find the China element.
I've heard this in film as well.
It's a massive story. So everyone in China knew Titanic. Everyone in China's seen the movie Kate and Leo and blah, 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 and all the rest of it, right? Then they find out there's a Chinese element to it, and it makes it all the more, in terms of China being part of the global economy at that time, which some people, would have forgotten. a lot of people in China, or really a lot of people in China, know the Wallis Simpson story.
Yes.
They tend to see it as the abdication story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they tend to see it as a great love story.
Yeah.
That a king would give up a throne for a woman
Yeah,
against
yeah.
all advice, and they would go on to have a life. Of course, the story's not as simple as that, but they know that story. So to then find out that 12 years before that, when she was with her first husband, she ends up in Hong Kong and briefly in Guangzhou, Shanghai, Tianjin, and then for quite a long 7 months or so in Beijing. And we've got photos of it, and she loved Beijing and all the rest of it. This is a great story.
Brings it home then.
Then it becomes a story that they can relate to. Yeah. And I think that's a sort of a recipe for success if you want to find a story that will sell in China.
Yes.
And so, I think that's going to be they're going to like that one.
Yeah.
They're changing the name slightly, but I think they'll like it. As to what I'm doing at the moment, well, I've just finished a new book, which is a retelling of The Last Emperor.
Okay.
And The Last Empress. And I have a whole load of documents that... In November 1922, Wan Rong was married to Puyi, the boy emperor. It's the last great imperial pageantry procession in Beijing ever to happen.
Yeah.
Imperial one, right?
Yeah.
Not military or anything like that.
Yeah, because they're still happening.
And she goes in and they spend the next 2 years in the Forbidden City, and they only leave once or twice to go to the Summer Palace.
Yeah.
And they're 17 years old. I can talk about it another time. But I have a whole load of new documents about what life was like there. And it's not... It's completely different to the Bertolucci film.
Okay, that's
it's a very different story about the relationship between the last emperor and empress and their tutors. And everyone knows Reginald Johnston, the Scottish tutor of Puyi. Nobody knows Isabel Ingram, who was the companion tutor to Wan Rong. And I got access to her papers and some of Johnston's papers that hadn't been seen before.
Yes.
And... so it's just those 2 years. And then in December 1924, Feng Yuesheng, the warlord, kicks them out. Puyi falls into the hands of the Japanese and everything spirals down disastrously from there. And he ends up a traitor. She ends up an opium addict and dead. But everyone knows that story from The Last Emperor. But there's this 2 years in the Forbidden City where you have a young couple with really their only companions being these two foreign people that are in the Forbidden City. Yeah. And they have this much more different life than you think they might have had. And the book's also about the Forbidden City and just this incredible citadel that obviously still exists in the middle of Beijing. That's fascinated me from the first time I went there.
Yeah. So. It can't not really, can it? I mean, I quite like the idea, the premise of your books are often around a year or a 2 year period. It's a very tangible in your mind.
Talk about what advice have you been given? The great biographer in England, Selina Hastings, who's written biographies of Somerset Maugham and Bloomsbury, Nancy Mitford, a great biographer, big biographies of literary figures. Yeah. And she said to me that she would not embark on a biography of someone until she knew how they died, right? Yeah. Because she's very much page 1 they're born, page 350 they die. Yeah. And if the death was quiet and boring and just, the sort of death we all want, but if they had that kind of death, the story would just peter out. Yes. And so I felt, often you'd look at wanting to do biographies of people that they had a life before they got to China, then a super exciting life in China, and then they'd go home for 20 years to a comfortable retirement. So and you thought, where's the interest there? Yeah. So it's that brief moment in people's lives. Yeah. So,
which is under the microscope, which is the...
City of Devils is really about that Gudao solitary island period between 1937 and 1941, where Shanghai is surrounded, international parts of Shanghai are surrounded by the Japanese. Yeah. You don't need to go before and after that. There isn't anything after that. It's just a disaster for them. But and Wallis Simpson, it's that literally that year that it's almost to the day a year that she spends in China. And I figure, of course, you can tee up what she did before. I kind of have assumed with that book, successfully, I think, that everyone knows what comes afterwards. Yeah, right? Exactly. I don't need to spend 100 pages telling you what happened after. So, and again, with Puyi, I've done this kind of, which is out next September 2026. I've done this thing whereby it's just from that moment of the imperial marriage to the imperial expulsion.
Yeah.
We'll just look at those 2 years. I think it would be interesting to come back and look in more detail, maybe I will at some point, about when Puyi was emperor of Manchukuo. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that probably deserves a good book on its own.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do the Forbidden City.
Yeah.
So that's that. And then my next project is, fun enough, there's an Australian publisher who's been very, very successful, certainly in the UK and Australia, with these books called The Shortest History of Japan, Shortest History of China, Shortest History of Italy, Shortest History of Portugal or wherever, right?
Yeah.
Shorter books, 40,000 words, some boxed text. They seem to be very popular with younger people who like a more jumpy sort of book. Yeah. And they also seem to be popular with some kind of nerdy travel people who don't want that Lonely Planet million things that you should do, or that kind of Lux Guide, this is all going to cost you a fortune kind of holiday. So they seem to be popular with nerdy people. Okay. So they've commissioned a bunch of books called Shortest History of Cities. Right. There's about 10 commissioned, and I'm doing Beijing. Okay. Which is sort of interesting because you can have an argument about that. I was talking to the person who's writing the Shortest History of Hong Kong the other day, and they were saying, well, it's quite a lot of history. I've got quite a lot of history to deal with in 40,000 words. And I was like, come on, I got 3,500 years. I got 353 emperors.
I would have said that was the bigger problem.
So, but it's going to be a really, they like them to be literary. They like them to be quirky. They like them to pull out various little things that you might go and see if you went to Beijing, like a painting that explains something, or a statue, or an inscription, or something.
You've really got to think about that, haven't you, in terms of how to make it punchy enough.
So I think that's quite a nice writing challenge and a research challenge, and that came out of the blue to me, and I'm kind of really, really looking forward to that. So I'm spending the next couple of weeks in Beijing looking at a few things I haven't seen, because they're always opening like 10 art galleries a week in Beijing or whatever. Right. So I, and then I want to kind of start thinking about that. It's got to be done by next February. So I want to think about that. But it's an interesting challenge, and it's another way to write about Beijing, and I expect the word sojourners.
Good.
There'll certainly be a lot of mention of hutongs.
That's all I like. So, okay, just to wrap up then, if people want to follow your work, what you're doing next, you're on Instagram, websites and Facebook.
I'm pretty much everywhere. My blog is at ChinaRhyming.com.
ChinaRhyming.com.
Post up loads of stuff on there, old pictures and things. But I also do on Instagram, where I'm on as Old Shanghai Paul. That's it. I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Substack. Yeah. I do a Substack newsletter, which is really... Well, I mean, you don't have to pay for that, because it's just about where I am, what I'm doing, any appearances I'm doing, anything like that. But it has a few, any reviews that have been nice. So I'm on Substack, and then now and again on Threads and Blue Sky. Yeah. Absolutely not on X.
Okay.
And so I'm not hard to find.
Okay. Well, I'll put those links after the podcast. People can get you there. And just to say, Paul French, thank you very much for coming in today.
Brilliant. It's been lovely to come to Studio 114 and, the experience of Moi Wo on a Wednesday morning.
We're all here. Thank you, mate. Cheers. You can listen to all our VIBErations podcasts published on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Podbean and Amazon Music, and a whole host of others. Or you can watch on our YouTube channel under Live at VIBEHK. Or follow the links from my website at vibehk.com. The opening and closing music comes from Celestial and is called Green Island Dub, and is on the Retrospect vinyl album, on sale at Vibe. Finally, a reminder that Vibe is open 6 days a week from Tuesday to Sunday, 12 noon until approximately 6:30 p.m. Thanks for listening to the 55th Vibe Book and Music Shop podcast called VIBErations. I'm Gary Brightman. You get my vibe?
Can you imagine what this old island must have looked like to those Dutch sailors when they first saw it? Fresh green. Like a dream of a new world.
They must have held their breath. Afraid it would disappear before they could touch it.